Hi, I'm Metta Spencer and in Toronto, and we're going to have a conversation about China today, or maybe even a little bit about India. And my guest is the wife of a very old friend. So although I've known her a long time, I know her husband a lot better because he was a student of mine about 47 years ago. This is Rebecca Fannin, and Rebecca is in Burlington, California.
Burlingame.
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 I've been away from California so long that I can't remember the localities that I used to be very familiar with because I was a Berkeleyan for a long time.
Sure.
Anyway, hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Metta.
Yeah, it's great to see you. Rebecca is a business journalist, and Rebecca moved more or less to California. I think she said what early 90s or the end of the 80s, and said that there wasn't a lot going on there, so she started going to China instead, right?
Right. Well, I moved to California as a journalist to cover the dot-com boom, and then the dot-com bust happened. So there wasn't a lot of new activity in Silicon Valley, and so some of the pioneers began going to China and India, and I followed the story.
And so you've written several books about kind of like biographical, to some extent, they're kind of little biographies of interesting, there you go. Silicon Dragon was the one that I got 3 or 4 years ago, wasn't it?
And 10 years.
Now you've got a new one though, Silicon Dragon.
This is...
And the new one, the Tech Titans of China. That's great. You also wrote one about India. Now, do you have that at your hand? Oh, there you go, Startup Asia. I have not read that one, although I should, because it sounds fascinating. In fact, that's one of the things that I'd love to compare is you go to India, you go to China. Do you often go to India anymore, or do you mostly concentrate on China?
Well, lately I've been more often going to China, but in researching this book, Startup Asia, I spent a fair amount of time in India, traveling there. And I've been to India probably 6 or 7 times. But I've been to China about 100 times. So,
stay long enough. I think it would be unbearable having that long trip. Do you stay long enough to make it worth having the sore bottom that must occur from having to fly so long?
Oh, yeah. Well, sure. A couple weeks to a month, usually, and making the most of it.
So you know a lot of folks there by now. Do you have personal friends in China or even also in India?
Yeah, I have quite an established network in China and India, and Silicon Valley too. And work in Israel and London, because I took my Silicon Dragon concept of a book into creating a media business that also has events. So we've done events in all of these markets, and I've done about 100 events, live events, in each one of these markets for the past 10 years. And now I've shifted to online because I can't travel. I'm really getting itchy to travel again. I have to say, I'm really, yeah. No, it's been 2 months and I haven't gone anywhere. So
I haven't gone anywhere either, but I love it. Real discovery how much I enjoy actual solitude, and I really wouldn't like that kind of long trip. I don't know how people do it, but at any rate, congratulations. You've made it.
I get up and walk around the plane, which they don't like, and then I go in the back and I do stretching exercises and yoga in the back, which they don't like either, but I do it because otherwise.
I know they should encourage that because it's really good for you. That's right.
It is.
Tell me about I think what I really would like to. I've only been in China once, and that was for a month in 1980. And I just followed it it was right after I'd been in India for a month too. And the thing that struck me was that there was such an extraordinary contrast between the two societies. It was just like being on totally different planets at the time. The Indians were, it was overcrowded and people didn't seem to know what they were up to. sort of wandering around. But my goodness, the Chinese were working hard in those days. You'd see them on their bicycles with their denim Mao suits, you know, that were, they only had blue, black, and gray. Those are the only colors they made.
Right.
Although I understand, I bought some yardage of silk in one of their, you know, it's like a grocery store or something. And I understand one of the women told me, yes. I said, well, who buys this yardage? Because you don't see anything like that on the street. She said, we wear it underneath, we hide it. So even in those days, they had some desire to look for silk clothing and flowers and things. And so under their Mao suits, sometimes they would be wearing gorgeous silk blouses or whatever. Did you know that? And
no, I didn't know that, but it makes me think about the wonderful saris in India and how colorful they are.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Yes, it's true. So the contrast was amazing. Tell me how it is nowadays.
Well, they're still worlds apart, but I think technology has helped to bring the two together. Many of the types of internet and mobile kinds of technologies that we have in the Western world and in China are in India now too. And they're well penetrated even into rural areas. And so things have improved in India. I think one of the greatest shocks is getting off at the airport in Mumbai or Delhi. Well, Mumbai in particular. You're immediately into a dusty road with beggars on both sides, and the planes land in the middle of the night, and there's no electricity, there's no light. You're going along, and you think, oh my gosh, and then you get to your hotel the next day, you go out, and you're surrounded by beggars. You just cannot get away from them.
That's still the case then, really?
Well, that was the case. And I think things have improved, and the Prime Minister has done a good job of pushing the economy forward. So, I mean, for years, economy was a large degree based around outsourcing to the Western world. There were all these outsourcing, telephone centers, right? That you would call up customer service. You would get someone in India. There were many big companies that came out of India. Infosys is one of them, and they were all centered around outsourcing. But now today, the Indian tech economy is diversified, and now you see companies like an Alibaba, like an Uber, like an Amazon in India today.
Oh,
and,
all of those names, those particular brands are in India, Alibaba too, for example?
Yeah, well, Amazon has made a major push into India, but they're competing against a local brand. So we'll see how well they do. Amazon actually lost in China to the local brand Alibaba, but in India, I know Jeff Bezos is very gung-ho about India. So he's been there and ridden,
Amazon will do better in India than it did in China.
Well, it has, yeah.
Why?
No, I think maybe they learned some lessons from their China experience. And, I think Jeff Bezos has put a lot of his own time into this. He's been to India personally and made a big fanfare and got lots of headline coverage every time he would come in. Oh, India is spending $100 million to penetrate India. Amazon is spending $100 million, or with phenomenal amounts of money. And Jeff Bezos will be on one of those caravan things waving, and it was like a parade. Incredible. So yeah. But anyhow, I think that they, as a Western brand, it's often tough for Western brands to get in and beat the local competitor, because often the local competitor knows their own consumer better than someone coming in from overseas.
Well, are they very competitive? Is there a sense of, even in public discourse, do the Indians and the Chinese see each other as sort of adversaries, or who's the bad guy? Would in China would the Chinese be more hostile to, say, the U.S. or to India, let's say? How would you look at the relationship between these countries?
Well, right now the hostility between China and the U.S. is pretty is strong, and we're at a low point in U.S.-China relations. India and China have long squabbled over borders and different different philosophies, but I think right now the U.S. and China, it's that's the relationship that I would say is the most troubled in the world right now, and they're the two superpowers economically and technologically. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot at risk.
Yeah, and this when you talk to business people, to what extent is the political dynamic reflected in, or maybe caused by, the commercial competition? To what extent are these business competitors tied into, nationalism or loyalty of that kind?
Yeah, well, definitely nationalism has become a stronger force today. The U.S. is regulating China's influence in the U.S., trying to contain it, trying not to let Chinese companies invest in the U.S. as they had been for many years, and investing in our leading technology companies, including companies even like Tesla. So this has been a really interesting pushback that I think has largely been politically motivated. Washington, D.C. Has gotten onto this in a big way and is pushing China's influence back as much as it can. There have been rumors that there may be even restrictions on Chinese companies listing, going public on NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange. Certainly, there's been a lot of noise around fraud allegations of Chinese companies that are trading in the U.S. There was a big one that just got into trouble called Luckin Coffee, which is a competitor to Starbucks in China. And now the suspending has been stopped on, the trading has been suspended on NASDAQ. And this is going to impact other Chinese companies that may want to list in the U.S. because the sentiment against China, it's not only a political issue today, but there's also a lot of resentment toward China over this coronavirus, and politicians calling it a Chinese virus, and people like other politicians calling Zoom a Chinese company when it is not a Chinese company. It happens to be founded by a Chinese entrepreneur who has his graduate degree from Shandong Science and Technology University, but he immigrated to the U.S. He is a U.S. citizen. He immigrated here 20 years ago and has worked in Silicon Valley for 20 years. So there's a lot of, politics is definitely playing a big part in this economic, they call it, a split, and a splinter net, I've heard it called, where it's possible that these two markets could develop their own standards for technologies, like technologies that we use every day. For instance, we're still dealing with the issue of two different technologies for computers and for smartphones. We have Android and we have Apple, and we have Microsoft and we have Apple, and sometimes they don't work well together. So we really, for consumers' sake, we really don't want to see the politics impacting this business development and this technology development like it is right now. because if this continues, we will start to see some of this separation of two worlds of
Yeah, now
technology and
that's
economic
what
influence.
let's talk about this 5G business. Because even here in Canada, there's a lot of, I think it's unsettled which way it's going to go.
Yeah,
Is Canada going to play with Huawei or
yeah,
not? And apparently that is going to be very fateful, because if I'm not mistaken, the implication is that we're going to have two different universes of internet in effect. That there'll be countries where you do one kind of internet and it won't be compatible with things going on in the rest of the world.
yeah.
Is that true? And how worrisome would you consider that? I think that would be terrible, frankly.
Well, yeah, I'm thinking about how Wi-Fi is gone. It's everywhere now. But remember, before the Wi-Fi era, before people had Wi-Fi, there was the plug-in, the broadband cable, and you would plug the broadband cable in, and sometimes it would work, and sometimes it wouldn't work. There was always some kind of system foul-up when you go to a new place. Plug the broadband cable in. Now today with Wi-Fi, it's pretty much okay. You turn your Wi-Fi thing on, you look for the network, and you're on. But before, with broadband cable and with dial-up, it always seems that there were clunkier systems to get around. So
But
yeah,
isn't it why 5G that's going to be split between the Chinese system and everything else?
could be. I mean,
And they're not compatible, right? So you either choose one or the other, and it sounds like it's shaping up to be a real threat, because the people in the US at any rate claim that probably the Chinese are planting bugs or things in the 5G that would make it risky to install it, because you could be tampered with. Do people in China themselves believe bad things about their own government's activities? Frankly, I believe the Chinese do a lot of bad things, and maybe the U.S. does too. But I really have more suspicion of how much manipulation or something that Chinese are doing. And so you can set me straight if you want to. And I wonder if the Chinese business people believe in their own system and believe that they're honest, and don't believe that there's any kind of short circuiting of things, or not.
well, they're playing by the rules, and those are in some cases the government rules. They're playing by that. If you want to operate in China, you must play by the rules.
Everybody plays by the rules if they have to, but the question is, do they believe in what they're doing?
You'll never get them to say that they disbelieve it.
You'll never get anybody to say they don't trust their own government, or that they think that, for example, Huawei would put backdoor ways into people's computers.
They would never say that.
Yeah.
Particularly not in China, if they're in China.
Well, would they get in trouble if they did? Are they being realistic about a really totalitarian system, if you don't mind the language? Or is it just normal patriotism, like Americans love the extraordinary number of Americans who go along with Trump? I don't understand it, but they sure do.
I think there is a business patriotism in China.
Yeah.
I do see that, and granted, among consumers, you're not going to hear them say much negative either, because, well, sensitivity issues, but also there's censorship. So they're not getting the straight word, and unless they have a workaround to get the straight word. But so many journalists have been expelled from China now, that the reporting on China to the Western world has definitely deteriorated. and this is an issue as well.
Okay, so these firewalls that they put up, these censorship barriers for information, they're actually succeeding in keeping people from finding out things they might know otherwise, right? There's a guy, we have something here called the Citizens Lab. It's part of the University of Toronto, but they're all cyber experts who have, years ago, they figured out a way that they could help people in a country that was, you know, behind a firewall, if you will, behind a censorship barrier in the internet, to make a connection with some partner in the West who would sort of share the computer. I think if I wanted to, I could. I haven't done it, but you know, I could give somebody in China the right to somehow use my computer, and they could get the information they want, or they could do pretty much anything they wanted without getting caught. I can't explain this because I haven't the technology, but I haven't talked to anybody lately. In fact, the Citizens Lab is very very, they're very secretive. You can't go there and talk to them. They don't answer their phones or anything. They are worried that people are spying on them, and with good reason. But you get into the elevator and you push the button for the third floor, which is their floor, and the elevator won't stop unless you have a key because you can't get on that floor there. That's for privacy secrecy reasons.
Yeah.
But so I have very little contact with those people. But so I don't know the extent to which this innovation of theirs is having any kind of, well, do they have any traffic or any audience or consumers or, you know, partners in places like China that are interested in having discussions with people in other countries?
Yeah, well, you know, Zoom is open in China.
No kidding. I could have a Zoom conversation that like we're having now with you if you were in China?
From what I understand.
Well, okay. But now
Yeah.
if there is censorship, what would happen to somebody who told me, let's say I talked to a Chinese who was kind of a dissident and he spoke up too much, what would be likely to happen to a Zoom panelist?
They might put some black tape over that part, or it might go silent. It might go silent. It may not be that obvious.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh.
I haven't heard of these incidents yet on Zoom, but I have experienced the television situation like that.
Maybe you can help me get in touch with some people. I would love to do a talk show with some people in China. And in particular, you know, I've been very keen right now to get in touch with other networks or organizations that are doing work on multiple global threats. Because now for the last couple of years, I've been working on a list of 6 global threats, which include pandemics. And at the time, people said, pandemics? What do you want to talk about pandemics for? Well, because that's a global threat. You know, so now I'm finding other places, and one is at Stanford, close to where you are, that has an institute that's working on a number of global threats.
Right.
And there's a new one in Australia that I invited the chairman or one of the board members to our last steering committee meeting on Sunday night, and he came in by Zoom, and we had a chat about solving global threats from Australia and Canada together. And I'll be in touch with some people in UK and some of the people, I think Paul Eric's people at Stanford, in the biology department at Stanford. And so now if I could find somebody in China, that would be interesting to have a Zoom conversation.
Well, maybe I can help you with that. Maybe I could help you with that. You know, if you could get to the Alibaba Foundation, maybe. The Alibaba Foundation, they've been donating a lot of medical equipment to the U.S. to help fight the coronavirus. And so they're probably looking for some publicity around that. And that would be a way to, so Alibaba Foundation. You know, they're based in Hangzhou, China. And of course, they're the Amazon of China.
Uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, so Jack Ma is their visionary leader, who's pretty well known around the world now.
Well, that's really, he was one of the stars of your book, or the biography in your
Yeah,
first book, Silicon Dragon, wasn't he?
yeah, definitely. So on this political situation and the technologies. One clear example of this is we had a venture capitalist on. I have this a weekly webinar called Ask a VC Anything. So last week we had Gary Rochelle of Qiming, and that's a leading venture capital firm based in China, and they have a number of biotech companies that are developing related vaccines and tests around the coronavirus. And so apparently one of the founders of one of these companies went to Washington, D.C., a high-level official whose name I'm going to leave out. And they said, we don't want anything Chinese. So here's a case where China and U.S. could be working, China and the Western world could be working together on cures and advancements, but we're turning our back to them.
That's tragic. Yes, yes. Okay. So did you say they're working on vaccines? How
Yes.
far along are they with their vaccine, or maybe they're plural?
Well, they could be one of the, from what I understand, they could be first or second to the market with it.
Well,
But China is very advanced in biotech. It's very, and they have the regulatory environment for testing is not as rigid as what we have in the Western world. So often they can green light things before we can.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, but So Qiming is probably the biggest healthcare investor in China, and they have a number of companies that are working in this area.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so they would. So I should talk to Alibaba Foundation. I didn't even really know there was a foundation, but
Mm-hmm.
they are donating medical supplies now, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, and
But I have to say that I even got a donation.
you did. What's
But
that?
it's not from Alibaba. It's from Huawei. They sent it to me. It's 50 masks. It's directly from
Masks.
Shenzhen.
Oh, really? Are
Yes,
these
directly.
in whatever those fancy masks are that the medical people have?
Well, it does say medical face mask.
Oh,
It's more comfortable.
oh. Well, have you worn one?
No, I
Well,
haven't taken them out. I'm saving them for somebody in need.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yes, it's probably true because I probably would too, because I don't go out and therefore I don't need one. And I don't even, I don't even see people. I saw a couple of people out in the backyard with the squirrels, and they had masks on for the first time.
Oh, really?
And how much are people in California wearing masks? I don't even know Toronto because I don't see. And I hear that a lot of people are wearing, but I also saw something on the news last night about the beaches in California were open, and everybody was lying on the beach, just wasn't right, and the governor was having a fit, or
That's true.
a moment of discipline that he was admonishing people.
It's
Yeah.
true.
So how are
Yeah.
things there
Well, I'd say more than about 3/4 of people are wearing masks. And in order to go into the grocery store, see, the grocery store is the only thing happening. So to go to the grocery store is like, a big outing. But to go to the grocery store, you have to wear a mask. You can't get in otherwise. There's also social distancing to get into the grocery store. They only allow a certain number to go in. So one has to come out before another goes in. You're in line to go into the grocery store. Then they sanitize the carts. There's glass shields up between you and the cashier. The cashiers are wearing gloves. There's sanitizing things. There are also one-way aisles in the supermarkets, which I kind of like the one-way aisles because then you don't have a collision course with two shopping
What's
carts.
the point of the one-way aisles? Oh, just so that you won't bump it, you won't get close to anybody. I see.
Yeah. So, and then they have a tape on the floor at the cashier line every 6 feet to show you what 6 feet is. And you have to adhere to these things. They're pretty strict about it. They've done a very good job. I think California has done an excellent job well, I mean, unfortunately, the U.S. overall, the fact that we don't have all these other countries got tested out, and large percentages of the population got tested, and we don't even have 5% of our population tested, I don't think.
No, but the ones who've been tested, I hear is a shocking number are positive or indicate that they've had it.
Yeah.
And that Santa Clara County was the hot spot. Is that right?
Yeah, for the Bay Area, Santa Clara County is the hot spot. I'm in San Mateo County, so Santa Clara, then San Francisco San Mateo is fourth on the list of the counties in the Bay Area. New York City is the hot spot. That's where you really don't want to be in New York City.
I was reading on Facebook what John does before he goes out to the grocery store. Sounds like about 10 different layers of different kinds of masks and scarves and things on his face before he ventures out. I don't blame him, because the number of people that they've found who've got antibodies or something from in New York, apparently very high proportion of New Yorkers who have at least had something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. New York City is a tough place to live in any case, but with the coronavirus, the lines at the grocery stores and crowding.
Is there any reason to think that people coming from China are the source of the infection in California? Because I think it was first really strong in Washington State, right? A nursing home or something. And why? I mean, it was hard for me to imagine who would have come from Wuhan to this nursing home, or, how would that have been transferred?
Well, they did trace back a case in Santa Clara County back into early January, I think, and much earlier than had originally been thought. So I think some of these cases were coming from people who had traveled in China. Remember, Chinese New Year was about to happen, and a lot of people, they go home, go to their families during Chinese New Year. So it was the worst time because everybody was traveling, and it was spreading. And, China did a good job of containing it. Once the word got out, they kept it, under wraps for too long. But once they tackled it, the Chinese people, they did stay home. They did not go out. If we believe the numbers, they have largely contained it. Where in the U.S., we have very independent-minded people here who just do whatever they want, and they're not going to adhere to these rules. And the virus is definitely spread, particularly in metropolitan areas where we don't have a lot of social distancing.
Yeah, but also some of the state, I think it's Georgia, that has opened up things probably prematurely.
Yeah.
As I don't know, I don't have an opinion about, because I understand. I mean, I kind of can see it both ways, although I certainly am much more leaning toward the notion of be very, very cautious and take your time. But I understand, there could be a time when, if you don't have jobs for people and it looks like people are going to be out of work a long time, then there will be real hardship, and you can have people suffering from that standpoint. How much opposition was there any, I guess, in China when they were told to stay home? I think they even they boarded up people's front doors if they did. Make sure they didn't go out.
Yeah, they had the neighbor tattletale system.
Oh, did they? They had that. They brought that back, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, but people are not. Never did complain overtly much about.
Oh, we didn't hear about it.
Yeah, but I'm just back to sort of the question I asked a little while ago about the people you know, because by now you have a network of friends in China, and they must be willing to share some of their political values in conversations. Do they wish they had a democracy or not?
You know, I don't think so.
No.
Um, no, look, the Chinese people have they've grown up in this environment of an authoritarian kind of system and Big Brother, right? And so in China today, there's a much greater acceptance of big data, of privacy issues don't matter so much, that the common good matters more than an independent-minded kind of environment. So I see much more of a philosophy around common good, and the system is staying in place because it has worked. It has seen China's economy develop enormously over the past 2.5 decades, and it's lifted up many people. And when the people are satisfied and can get what they want, and they can get plenty of consumer goods today that they couldn't get before, they're more content, and they're less likely to rebel. And of course, we've seen what's happened with some earlier rebellions, like in 1989. Wait a minute, I don't think it was 89. It was earlier than that, in Beijing, where these rebellions were snuffed out and quickly curtailed. But you do hear of isolated protests in some areas. You do hear about that, and I think the Western world wants China to be democratic, but the Chinese people, it's not to them getting ahead, making money, having what they want, having the kind of life they want, the progressions that they've had. That's much more satisfying, I think, to them than a different system of rule. And I think the Chinese people are just more accustomed to having a strong leader who can dictate things.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I have two lines, explanations of or issues on that. One is I wonder to what extent this actually has anything to do with Confucianism as a doctrine or as a philosophy, which was not exactly democratic, whatever else it was. It had many good qualities. But the other thing was that I had a friend, in fact, a man who was sort of my mentor, Alex Incolas, who had been teaching a year, I think, in someplace in China, whether it's Beijing or where. But he said this was just before the Tiananmen event. And he wasn't a bit surprised at that point, because he said the students that he met at the university, his students, were all very keen to have some political changes and freedoms and democracy and so on. So at that point, there really was a demand. And question is, was that somehow atypical or a deviation from traditional Chinese culture? And would you say that traditional Chinese culture really would be generally supportive of authoritarianism?
Yeah, I do feel that when I go to China, and I used to feel this a lot more than today, that I would feel that people were together, that I didn't go out into society and feel like there was a lot of friction. Whereas if I go out in New York City, I can often immediately feel friction walking down the sidewalk. But in Shanghai and Beijing and other places I've been, I've often walked around. I'm usually by myself, and felt like kind of like we're all in this together, kind of feeling that I didn't get in the Western world.
Mm-hmm.
Now it became, the culture slightly changed with a change, it began to change as Chinese people became more assertive and more confident and more demanding. I remember being in a taxi queue in Beijing, and the taxi, we were both in the queue, and the taxi driver pulled up to me, and she just burst into tears. Like, wow, okay. That may not have happened in the past, but it's just an example of this kind of more assertive culture that I saw developing in China.
What was she crying about?
We were crying because she wasn't going to be the first to get picked up in the taxi.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, there sure are cultural differences, aren't there? I remember just less than a week ago, I was telling somebody of a comparable situation where I had to stand in line in Warsaw. This was in 1989. And you had to wait for taxis at a certain place. And then when your turn came, you could get the next taxi. But I remember I was commenting on the fact that every Polish person I met was so extraordinarily generous that they'd say, no, please take my taxi turn.
Uh-huh.
They would do things like walk miles through the city to lead me to a certain destination rather than just walk me that way and so on. But it's certainly interesting that if a woman would burst into tears because you got her turn or what she wanted a turn at the taxi. Huh?
Oh yeah. And then some of the ladies in Shanghai in particular are so dressed up. Yeah, they really have very high heels, very fashionable, and more so than you might see in New York City or Paris, kind of to an extreme. So,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Do you see that, by the way, in India much?
I haven't seen it, so I didn't see this transformation happening in India.
No, not even in a
Yeah.
certain class, because I had some Indian friends who were talking about going back to India and visiting people, and their members of their family had, let's say, liberated views about a number
Uh-huh.
of cultural and,
Like
behavior.
arranged marriages.
I will go into it, but that they were shocked. They said we would not. They thought that
Oh
we
yeah.
were very, permissive about things, and so they were trying to be the same way. So, and she said, we certainly aren't that way, and they were wrong. But it's very interesting to me to know that there are people that have aspirations in various directions. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think. Well, certainly, if you're talking about sex and sex life in China, I once had this lady tell me, well, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'll just repeat what she said. She said, to us, it's not a big deal. It's, she was younger. It's not a big deal. Hook up, and it's sort of like just very common, and it's like eating, like just to satisfy, hunger. It's not. It's just not considered a big deal.
Interesting. Yeah.
I don't know. That's maybe neither here nor there, but
Well, I think it's true
it
that
was
different
kind of
cultures.
surprising to me, actually. It was surprising to me.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, it's certainly true that different cultures place different valuations on things. I think, I go to Russia a lot, or I used to, and it was like alcohol is, has very prominent importance in the world. It's viewed as very, it has a lot of power, a lot of influence over people, or they feel that, it's just figural. It's like a figure ground relationship in a painting. What stands out, and to me, people in Russia are very interested in alcohol. Used to be anyway. Maybe that's over. Well, and then if you look at Indian art, you would say that they were very interested in erotic things, and you would not say from the looks of ancient Indian art, the erotic art of these gods and goddesses, that they took it as just a simple matter of it's like eating and drinking, and it was a lot
Right.
more meaningful.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, also, in Chinese business culture, the real customary thing is to get, if you're doing an overseas deal, China and overseas, that get the foreigner drunk, right? You have, a gambe, and then it's like a contest of how many of these you can have. And you don't want to hurt foreign businessmen, so we don't want to go to those dinners, but we have to get the deal done.
Well, what do they expect of you? And how are you treated as a woman? What's the status of of gender relations in Chinese business?
Well, yeah, it's great being a foreigner in this case, and as a journalist, I'm kind of on the side. But they never demanded that I drink all that much. I just say, okay, just have a tiny sip, and then the next round, there would be like 12 rounds, and the next round have a tiny sip. But I have always been treated, and look, I'm in a unique situation as coming in as a foreign journalist. Because I was really one of the first American journalists writing about this whole entrepreneurial boom in China. And because of that, I got access to people who were kind of had been around a Western culture to some degree anyhow. So I really have never felt this influence, or I've never felt discriminated against. Oh, she's just a woman. Don't worry about her. She's not gonna, do this or that or be all that powerful. Whereas I have to say, in New York City, you can, businessmen racing, business executives racing for the train in Grand Central to go home to the suburbs. Don't get in front of them. They'll run you over. They will not hold the door for you. And I feel it much more in the U.S. And in India, I felt very neutral. I've always felt very neutral. I don't feel that I'm treated as a woman. I feel like I'm treated as a person, and I very much like that of being in Asia and having that kind of experience.
Mm-hmm.
Where in Silicon Valley, look, it's a very male culture. Wall Street's a very male culture. Investment banking, all these fields are very male culture. So that was one of the learnings that I had, and one of the great experiences of being a woman covering this.
Mm-hmm. I've had years ago, I did my PhD thesis was on university student politics in India. So the people I hung out with at Harvard were mostly people from India, or people studying India, and
Yeah.
but one of the things that we were fascinated by was the confidence that many Indian women had as leaders, or they seemed to have in those days. I don't know whether you would notice the difference now, because I think most Western women have become more assertive or confident about expressing themselves, but some of these Indian women were very prepossessing, and strong, and you knew that you were in the presence of somebody with some clout. And I don't know whether I've ever, is that true in in Chinese business? Are there a lot of women executives?
Yeah, India too. Yeah. It's probably a slightly higher proportion than it is here in the U.S. or the Western world.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, that's good for them. Yeah, there's a lot to be.
Yeah,
I could learn from. I think we could all learn from them. But back to my question about Confucius.
Maybe it's because the business culture was not as developed then, or so institutionalized then, that there was more opportunity for women to get ahead and not have to break the barrier. The barrier wasn't as strong. I don't know. It is very different though.
Well, in
I
those
found.
days, our explanation was that, and of course, I don't think it would be relevant today, but we were attributing a lot of the power of political women in
Mhm.
India to the fact that during the independence movement, the men often went to prison, and the women
Oh,
picked up the roles and ran things
uh-huh.
in their absence,
Right,
which gave them some remarkable experience. Um,
right.
and I don't think that'd be relevant anymore. And I'm not sure whether I'd still find as many very strong Indian women, disproportionately more than in the U.S. or maybe in Canada nowadays. But interesting. Okay. So when are you going back there?
Well, not for a while.
But you will as soon as you can, right?
Well, I'm itching. I'm supposed to go to Sydney in August, and I was supposed to go to Hong Kong again in July. I was supposed to be in Hong Kong in February and April. All these things got canceled or postponed. And I was thinking last night, where I do my daily walk around the neighborhood, that when I was in Israel in February, that just seems like eons ago, where I had the liberty to just get on a plane and fly to Israel and fly back and and go to several conferences when I was there too. I think, wow, that was great.
By the way, you mentioned Hong Kong. What do you think is going to come of that? It's gone on so long, and I can't see who's winning.
Oh yeah, right. They've been through so many spells of the protests. I was over there during the protest several times, and it seemed very civilized to me after what I've seen in other markets. But it certainly got a lot of press attention. But I think that's on the backboard. That's definitely a big issue. How China is going to this transition. Hong Kong is coming up on in not that many years. And it's good that it's being addressed now rather than waiting until the deadline. And
Sorry, what's the deadline? I didn't know there was a deadline.
well, the 50 years, right?
What happens 50 years they can legally take over if they want to. Is that without having broken any agreement? Is that the deal?
Right. Yeah. Right now it's run separately as its own.
So the 50
Um,
year thing means that officially they'll be incorporated into China.
right. So that was the 50-year mark of the handover from Great Britain to China.
Yeah.
So that's where we are, and it's good that it's getting out now, and that's definitely was huge outcry for many months in Hong Kong, and then the coronavirus hit, and the coronavirus became the big issue, and now the political thing has died down somewhat.
Well, they just arrested.
I think it's going to come back again. It will come back again.
They just arrested this guy Martin Lee and a bunch of other people without any special reason. I mean, it was just looked like a good time to do it, so they did it. Looks like.
Yes.
Now, how much support would you find among people in China for Hong Kong's position, if any?
From what I can tell, they're staying out of it. The Hong Kong people are very, vocal about maintaining their independence.
Mm-hmm.
That's very much a common thread among everyone that I talk to.
They really want independence and not just a guarantee that they'll be able to keep some of their privileges.
Well, if things become very censored in Hong Kong, it could be a real negative.
Mm.
More and more now, Hong Kong is part of what they call the Greater Bay Area, and that means Hong Kong integrated with southern China as a big economic zone, and that's what's happening right now.
Well, with this Shenzhen thing, right? They're almost contiguous, aren't they? And Shenzhen, I was when I was in China, I remember taking a train from Hong Kong to, I don't know, can't remember names anymore. But the point is that I remember going through farmland, and that is where Shenzhen is now, which is like, what, 15, 20 million people.
Yeah.
And there was nothing there.
Yeah.
I'm almost sure there was nothing there on that, train trip.
Yeah.
So,
well, it used to be a separation between the Shenzhen city and the Hong Kong city. There would be, a greenery area. Now it's pretty much all developed the whole way.
So Shenzhen is just like the suburb of Hong Kong, or maybe you can say Hong Kong is a suburb of Shenzhen now.
Huh? They're definitely integrated. When I was just there in November, I took a ferry from Hong Kong into nearby Guangzhou. And it's easy enough from Hong Kong directly into Guangzhou. You can take a train directly from Hong Kong into.
Yeah, that's where I was trying. The name I was trying to remember, going from Hong Kong to Guangzhou, which was what used to be Canton, right?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Well, so now they're more integrated economically. That's the strategy, and certainly.
Well, is it easy to cross the border? I mean, do you have to show papers or anything to move from Hong Kong? You do.
Yeah, you have to go through customs. Yeah.
Is it complicated, or
no.
People do it a lot? My niece used to go there. She worked for Intel. She would go about 3 times a year, I think, to Shenzhen. But I didn't really talk to her about what it was like. She just, I don't think she liked to go very much.
Yeah. So I'm about to run out of time before I do my practice session on Zoom with my Ask a VC Anything. I have him coming up pretty soon.
Tell me again the name of your show. Ask what?
Ask a VC Anything.
A VC is of what?
Venture capitalist.
Oh, see, I don't know the lingo.
So I'm getting them from all over the world. I'm getting them from Silicon Valley, New York, Singapore, Hong Kong. I'm reaching out to. I do one every week, and then the audience can ask questions, and they've been pretty active asking questions. And they can ask them anything, and I say, if you don't ask, I'm going to ask. So I get to be the host of the show.
Well, maybe I'll try that instead of this kind of system. I did a live streaming for a while, but it seemed like an awful lot of work to schedule it, and nobody necessarily showed up at the right time. But with a webinar, you get people to sign up, and you can count on presence, can't you? How many people sign up for your webinars?
Well, I think the most we've had so far is a paid event. We're getting registration fees. Oh. We could have hundreds if we didn't have a paywall, but we have a paywall.
Oh, good for you. Maybe I'll charge people to come and look at you.
No. You could charge people. You could. Look, the Zoom meeting the reason I went to a webinar is that's the way you can have a paid event. So basically what I've done is I take my paid events that were live and make them online. It's the same model.
I have to look at my model all over again. Yeah, I don't know about this. I like what I do, but anyway.
Yeah, I like what you do. I've watched many of your videos on you put on Facebook, and I thought they're very, very good.
Well, it's my social life. This is the main thing I do during the week. That's my fun. As instead of going to having a dinner party, I do a talk show. It's fun.
I know. Well, I can kind of relate to that. I was thinking last week, why didn't I get more done last week? And I thought that's because you were on like 5 Zoom meetings. You were interviewed on 5 Zoom, and you did 2 Zoom meetings of your own, and I did my newsletter. I'm thinking, how much work am I person doing?
Yeah, you don't feel you've done any work if you're just on Zoom, but still, it sure takes the time.
It does, but it is fun. I agree, it's fun, and more power to you for doing these kinds of sessions. I hope we covered enough points that you wanted to.
We did. It's been fun. Exactly the kind of thing I wanted. Perfect. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Okay,
And
thank you.
let's be in touch. And I'll get to you about trying to get to some of these people in China to do some conversations with them. I hadn't
Yeah,
thought of
Alibaba
that.
Foundation would be good.
All right.
They will be good, and I know the publicity people there, so they might want to do it.
Good. Thank you
Okay.
so much. Okay, blessings.
Okay, I'll
Take
see
care.
you later.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye-bye. I'm leaving the meeting. Bye.
Okay.
This conversation is one of the weekly series Talk About Saving the World, produced by Peace Magazine and Project Save the World. Please visit our website at tosavetheworld.ca, where you can sign the Platform for Survival, a list of 25 public policy proposals that, if enacted, would greatly reduce the risk of 6 global threats to humankind. Come back next week for another discussion of a serious global issue.